What you're about to witness breaks every law of the wild. A cheetah mother, standing over two lion cubs that should be her enemies, protecting them as if they were her own blood. In the grasslands near Amarillo, Texas, something happened that no wildlife expert could explain. When the lioness returned and saw what this cheetah had done, the confrontation that followed left everyone speechless. This is not a fairy tale. This is not Hollywood. This is nature showing us that sometimes the greatest power isn't found in teeth and claws, but in something far more mysterious. Stay with me, because what happens at the end of this story will change the way you see the animal kingdom forever. The sun was beginning its descent over the vast Texas plains, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. In this territory, where the grass stretches endlessly and the horizon seems to have no end, life and death dance together every single day. This is where Zara lived, a cheetah mother whose spotted coat gleamed like precious stones under the fading light. She was not the strongest predator in these lands, but she possessed something more valuable than raw strength, speed, intelligence, and an unbreakable will to protect what was hers. Zara had 3 cubs of her own, hidden carefully in a den beneath an old mesquite tree. They were barely 3 months old, still clumsy on their paws, still learning that the world outside their shelter was both beautiful and deadly. Every day, Zara would leave them for hours, hunting across the open grassland, her body a blur of motion as she chased down prey. The territory she occupied was like gold in the wild, a stretch of land where water flowed from a natural spring and prey animals gathered in abundance. To control this space meant survival. To lose it meant death. But Zara was not alone in coveting this kingdom. A lioness named Sahara ruled the western edge of these same plains with absolute dominance. Sahara was everything Zara was not: massive, powerful, a living symbol of royal authority in the animal world. Where Zara relied on speed and cunning, Sahara commanded through sheer force and intimidation. She had 2 cubs of her own, young males who would one day grow into kings of this land. For now, they were playful, innocent, unaware that they were born into a hierarchy where only the strongest claim the crown. The tension between these 2 mothers had been building for weeks. Sahara's pride had been pushing deeper into Zara's territory, claiming the best hunting grounds, driving away the herds that Zara depended on to feed her family. In the wild, there is no negotiation. There are no treaties or compromises. There is only dominance and submission, and Zara refused to submit. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to simply hand over her kingdom without a fight. On this particular evening, as the air grew cooler and the shadows lengthened across the grassland, something unexpected happened. Sahara had left her cubs alone near a rocky outcrop while she went to drink from the spring. It was a mistake, a rare moment of carelessness from a mother who was usually so vigilant. The 2 lion cubs, curious and fearless in the way only young animals can be, wandered away from the safety of the rocks. They tumbled and played, wrestling with each other, completely unaware that danger was approaching from every direction. Zara was returning from her own hunt, carrying a small prey animal in her jaws, when she spotted them. Her first instinct, the one written into her DNA over thousands of years, was simple and brutal. These were the enemy. These cubs would grow into the very predators that would hunt her own children, that would challenge her for every scrap of territory and every drop of water. In the natural order of things, eliminating them now would be an act of survival, a strategic move that any predator would understand and respect. She approached slowly, her body low to the ground, her muscles coiled like springs ready to release. The lion cubs noticed her and froze, their golden eyes wide with confusion. They were too young to understand what she was, too innocent to recognize the threat standing before them. They made small mewing sounds, calling for their mother, but Sahara was too far away to hear them. The wind carried their cries in the wrong direction, out across the empty plains where no one would answer. Zara circled them, her mind calculating, her instincts at war with something else, something she couldn't quite name. She could end this now. 2 quick strikes, and the future would be safer for her own cubs. The territory would be more secure. The competition for resources would be reduced. It was the logical choice, the choice that nature itself seemed to demand. But as she looked into their frightened faces, something shifted inside her chest, something that had nothing to do with logic or survival. She thought of her own cubs, hidden back in their den, waiting for her to return. She thought of how vulnerable they were, how dependent on her protection, how easily their lives could be snuffed out if she failed them even once. These lion cubs, for all their future potential as her enemies, were just babies right now. They were alone, scared, and calling for a mother who could not reach them. And in that moment, Zara made a choice that would defy every law of the wild. Instead of attacking, she stepped closer and gently nudged one of the cubs with her nose. The little lion flinched but did not run. Zara dropped the prey animal she had been carrying and positioned herself between the cubs and the open grassland. She sat down, her body alert, her eyes scanning the horizon. She had become their guardian, their temporary protector in a world that showed no mercy to the weak and defenseless. Minutes passed like hours. The sun continued its descent, and the temperature dropped as evening settled over the plains. The lion cubs huddled closer to Zara, drawn to her warmth, somehow sensing that this strange spotted creature meant them no harm. It was a scene that should not exist, a moment that contradicted everything we think we know about predator behavior and territorial competition. A cheetah protecting lion cubs, a mother choosing compassion over strategy. A creature of speed and vulnerability standing guard over the children of her greatest rival. But nature was watching, and nature does not forget. Somewhere in the distance, Sahara had finished drinking and was now searching for her missing cubs. Her roars echoed across the grassland, each one growing louder and more frantic. She could smell them on the wind, could sense their location, and she was moving toward them with the unstoppable force of a mother whose children are in danger. The confrontation that was coming would test everything Zara believed about survival, about motherhood, and about the strange and powerful force that had compelled her to protect creatures that should have been her enemies. Sahara's roar split the evening air like thunder, a sound so primal and powerful that every creature within miles froze in recognition of what it meant. A lioness searching for her cubs is perhaps the most dangerous animal on earth, driven by a love so fierce it borders on madness. Zara heard it and felt her heart hammer against her ribs. She knew what was coming. She knew that in seconds, she would have to face something far larger and stronger than herself, something that could end her life with a single swipe of a massive paw. The rational part of her brain screamed at her to run, to abandon these lion cubs and disappear into the gathering darkness before Sahara arrived. She was a cheetah, built for speed, not combat. In a direct confrontation with a lioness, she had no chance of winning. 0. Her only advantage was her ability to outrun danger, to use her incredible velocity to escape threats that she could never overcome through strength. But if she ran now, she would be leaving these cubs alone, and something deep inside her refused to do that. The lion cubs sensed the change in the atmosphere. They pressed closer to Zara, their small bodies trembling, their instincts telling them that their mother was near, but also that something was terribly wrong. Zara remained perfectly still, her spotted coat almost glowing in the golden light of the setting sun. She could see Sahara now, a massive silhouette moving across the grassland with terrifying purpose, her muscles rippling beneath her tawny fur, her eyes blazing with maternal fury. When Sahara finally saw the scene before her, she stopped abruptly, her body going rigid with shock and confusion. There was her enemy, the cheetah who had been competing with her for territory, sitting calmly beside her two precious cubs. For a moment, Sahara's mind could not process what she was seeing. Was this a trap? Was the cheetah holding her cubs hostage? Was this some kind of elaborate ambush? Lions are not known for their imagination, but even Sahara's straightforward predator brain struggled to make sense of this impossible situation. She lowered her head and began to advance slowly, each step deliberate and measured. A low growl rumbled from deep in her chest, a warning that needed no translation. Zara did not move. She did not run. She simply sat there, her body positioned protectively between Sahara and the cubs, her eyes meeting the lioness's gaze with something that looked almost like defiance. It was a standoff that should have lasted seconds before erupting into violence, but instead, it stretched into something longer, something stranger. Sahara's cubs, hearing their mother's voice, tried to run toward her, but Zara gently blocked them with her body, keeping them behind her. It was a gesture so deliberate, so clearly protective, that Sahara hesitated. Her maternal instincts were screaming at her to attack this predator who stood between her and her children. But something else was happening here, something she could not quite understand. The cheetah was not threatening her cubs. The cheetah was protecting them. In the wild, territory means everything. It is wealth, power, and security all rolled into one. To control the best hunting grounds, the water sources, the sheltered dens, is to hold the keys to the kingdom. Sahara had spent years building her dominance in this region, fighting off rivals, raising her cubs to be strong and capable. She viewed every other predator as competition, as a threat to her family's survival. And yet, here was her rival, a creature she would normally drive away or kill without hesitation, standing guard over her most precious treasures. The sun was almost gone now, the sky fading from gold to purple to deep blue. In the gathering darkness, the two mothers faced each other across a distance of maybe 20 feet. The air between them was electric with tension, thick with the weight of a decision that would determine whether this moment ended in bloodshed or something else entirely. Sahara took another step forward. Zara did not retreat. The lion cubs mewed softly, confused by the strange energy flowing between these two powerful females. Then something remarkable happened. Sahara stopped growling. Her body language shifted slightly, the rigid aggression softening into something more like cautious curiosity. She circled slowly, trying to see her cubs, trying to assess whether they were injured or in danger. Zara turned with her, always keeping herself between the lioness and the cubs, but not in a confrontational way. It was more like a nurse presenting patients to a doctor, showing them, but maintaining oversight. When Sahara finally saw that her cubs were unharmed, even comfortable, something in her expression changed. Lions are not known for complex emotional displays, but those who study them closely will tell you that they are capable of gratitude, of recognition, of bonds that go beyond simple pack loyalty. Sahara could see that the cheetah had not only refused to harm her vulnerable cubs, but had actively protected them. In a world where predators routinely kill the young of competing species to reduce future competition, this was an act so unusual, so contrary to natural law, that it demanded acknowledgement. The standoff continued for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes. Neither mother moved aggressively. Neither backed down. They were locked in a moment of mutual recognition, two creatures who understood the weight of motherhood, the terror of having your children threatened, the overwhelming relief of finding them safe. The specific details of species, of territorial conflict, of natural hierarchy seemed to fade into the background, replaced by something more fundamental, more universal. Finally, Sahara made a decision. She took 3 slow steps backward, creating space. It was an invitation, a signal. Zara understood immediately. She stepped aside, allowing the lion cubs to run to their mother. They stumbled over each other in their haste to reach her, crying out in relief, burying their faces in her mane. Sahara lowered her massive head and nuzzled them carefully, checking them for injuries, breathing in their scent, confirming that they were truly safe. While this reunion was happening, Zara began to back away slowly, ready to disappear into the darkness and return to her own den, to her own cubs who were waiting for her. But before she could leave, something even more extraordinary occurred. Sahara looked up and made direct eye contact with the cheetah. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, two mothers separated by everything nature could throw between them, united by the one thing that transcended all those differences. What happened next, no wildlife expert could have predicted. Sahara did something that lions rarely do. She dipped her head slightly, a small gesture, barely noticeable, but in the language of predators, it was loaded with meaning. It was acknowledgement. It was respect. It was a debt recognized and silently promised to be remembered. Zara returned the gesture with a slow blink, a sign of peaceful intent in the feline world. And then she turned and melted into the shadows, moving like liquid darkness across the grassland. Where are you watching this video from? Spain, Mexico, Chile, the United States, or somewhere I cannot imagine? Tell me in the comments. I want to know where this story resonates with you. The days that followed that remarkable evening brought changes to the grasslands that no one could have anticipated. Word travels fast in the wild, carried not through words but through behavior, through scent markings, through the subtle shifts in territorial boundaries that predators monitor constantly. The other animals in the region sensed that something significant had occurred between the cheetah and the lioness, even if they could not understand exactly what. Zara returned to her den that night and found her 3 cubs exactly where she had left them, safe and sleeping peacefully. She curled around them, her body still trembling slightly from the adrenaline of the confrontation, her mind replaying the moment when she had chosen to protect rather than destroy. She had gambled with her life, had put herself in a position where she could easily have been killed, and yet she felt no regret. Some decisions cannot be explained through logic or survival strategy. Some choices come from a place deeper than instinct, from a part of the soul that recognizes kinship even across impossible divides. Sahara, for her part, returned to her pride and gathered her cubs close. The other lionesses in her group sensed that something had changed in their leader. There was a new thoughtfulness in her eyes, a slight shift in the way she surveyed the territory. She had always been a fierce and capable mother, willing to kill anything that threatened her young. But now she understood something she had not fully grasped before, that motherhood creates bonds that can cross even the most rigid boundaries that nature sets. In the following weeks, something unprecedented began to happen. Sahara stopped pushing aggressively into Zara's territory. She maintained her own hunting grounds, but no longer sought to expand them at the cheetah's expense. It was not friendship, not in the way humans understand the term, but it was a kind of truce, an unspoken agreement that they would share this land without constant conflict. In the wild, where resources are limited and competition is brutal, such arrangements are extraordinarily rare. Zara noticed the change immediately. The pressure that had been building for months, the constant stress of defending her territory against a much more powerful rival, began to ease. She could hunt more freely, could leave her cubs for longer periods without fearing that Sahara's pride would encroach on her den. It was like a weight lifting from her shoulders, allowing her to breathe more deeply, to move more freely across the grassland she called home. But the story does not end there. Nature has a way of testing such arrangements, of throwing challenges at fragile peace to see if it will hold. About 3 weeks after the incident with the lion cubs, a new threat emerged in the region. A coalition of male lions, young and aggressive, began moving through the area, challenging established territories, looking to claim their own kingdom. These males were in their prime, full of testosterone and ambition, driven by the biological imperative to take control of prides and eliminate any cubs that were not their own. When they reached the border between Sahara's territory and Zara's hunting grounds, they paused. The scent markings told them that a lioness with cubs lived here, which made it a valuable prize. A pride with young cubs was vulnerable, easier to take over. But they also detected something strange, something that confused their relatively simple understanding of territorial boundaries. There was cheetah scent mixed with lion scent, overlapping in ways that suggested cooperation rather than competition. The males decided to test the waters. They pushed into Sahara's territory one afternoon, moving with the swagger of young kings claiming their birthright. Sahara, who had been resting with her cubs in the shade of a rocky outcrop, immediately sensed the danger. She roared a warning, calling her pride to gather, preparing to defend her territory and her children against this new threat. The other lionesses in her pride responded quickly, forming a defensive line, but they were outnumbered and outmatched by these young, powerful males. The confrontation was about to turn violent when something unexpected happened. Zara appeared on a ridge overlooking the scene, her 3 cubs behind her, her body tense and alert. She had heard Sahara's distress call and had come to investigate. In normal circumstances, a cheetah would never involve itself in a fight between lions. It would be suicide, a pointless sacrifice that accomplished nothing. But these were not normal circumstances. Zara did something that defied all logic and self-preservation. She began to vocalize, making the high-pitched chirping calls that cheetahs use to communicate. The sound was strange and unsettling to the male lions, breaking their focus, drawing their attention away from Sahara's pride. Then Zara did something even more remarkable. She moved down from the ridge and positioned herself on Sahara's flank, not close enough to be within striking distance, but close enough to signal that she was part of this defense. The male lions were completely confused. They had never encountered anything like this before. A cheetah and a lioness, natural competitors, standing together against a common threat. It broke all the rules they understood about how the wild worked. One of the males took a step towards Zara, thinking she would be the easier target, the weak point in this bizarre alliance. But before he could get close, Sahara roared again, a sound so deep and powerful it seemed to shake the ground. She moved to cover Zara's vulnerable position, placing her own massive body between the male lion and the cheetah. The message was clear. If you want to challenge this territory, you will have to go through both of us. The male lions, confronted with this unified front, with 2 mothers who were willing to stand together despite their natural differences, hesitated. In the wild, hesitation is often enough to change the course of events. Predators are calculating creatures. They assess risk versus reward constantly. And suddenly, this territory did not look like the easy conquest they had anticipated. The standoff lasted for several tense minutes. Then, slowly, the male lions began to back away. They were still young, still learning the complex politics of pride takeovers. They recognized that this particular fight would cost them more than it was worth. They retreated, disappearing into the grassland to search for easier prey, for territories that were not defended by such an unusual and determined alliance. When the danger passed, Sahara and Zara remained where they were for a long moment, two mothers who had just protected their kingdoms together. Neither approached the other. Neither made any gesture of celebration or camaraderie. They simply acknowledged each other with a brief glance, an understanding passing between them that needed no words, no physical contact. They had proven that even in the wild, where survival of the fittest is the only law that matters, there are forces that can transcend competition and create bonds that defy natural order. Zara turned and called to her cubs, leading them back up the ridge and away from the Pride Lands. Sahara watched her go, then gathered her own cubs and moved them to a safer location deeper in her territory. The grassland returned to its normal rhythms, as if nothing unusual had happened, but everything had changed in ways that would ripple outward for seasons to come. The seasons turned, as they always do, and the grasslands near Amarillo transformed with the changing weather. Summer gave way to fall, and fall surrendered to winter. Zara's cubs grew stronger and more independent, learning the skills they would need to survive once they left her protection. Sahara's lion cubs grew as well, their playful tumbling evolving into the practiced movements of young predators learning their craft. The truce between the two mothers held. It was never formalized, never guaranteed, but it persisted through the changing seasons because both recognized its value. In a world where every day is a battle for survival, where hunger and thirst and predation are constant threats, having one less enemy made all the difference. The territory they shared became more prosperous because they were not wasting energy fighting each other. The prey animals that lived in the region thrived because the predator balance was more stable. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this story is what it reveals about the nature of motherhood itself. Scientists who study animal behavior will tell you that maternal instinct is one of the most powerful forces in nature, strong enough to make creatures risk their own lives for their offspring. What they encounter less often is maternal instinct that extends beyond the boundaries of species, that recognizes the vulnerability of young life regardless of whether those young will grow up to be friends or enemies. When Zara first saw those lion cubs alone and afraid, she could have killed them easily. It would have been the strategic choice, the one that ensured her own cubs faced less competition in the future. But she chose differently, not because she was weak or sentimental, but because she understood something profound, that in protecting them, she was protecting something larger than herself, larger than territory or dominance or survival. She was protecting the idea that life itself has value, that helpless young deserve protection, that mothers recognize other mothers across all the divides that nature creates. What happened when Sahara returned was equally remarkable. The lioness could have attacked immediately, could have killed Zara for daring to come near her cubs. But she paused. She observed. She recognized that the cheetah had chosen mercy when violence would have been easier. And in that recognition, she made her own choice to honor the gift that had been given. In the wild, power is usually measured in physical strength, in the ability to dominate and control. But this story reveals a different kind of power, one that exists in the space between creatures, in the choices they make when faced with the option to harm or to help. Zara had no physical power over Sahara. She could not force the lioness to spare her life or to respect her territory. But she had something else, the moral power that comes from choosing compassion over cruelty, from recognizing the sacred nature of motherhood even in your enemies. Some people who hear this story might say it is too good to be true, that nature is not capable of such complexity, such apparent nobility. But anyone who has spent time observing animals closely knows that they are capable of surprising us, of exhibiting behaviors that seem to transcend simple survival instinct. We like to think that humans have a monopoly on concepts like mercy, cooperation, and altruism. But the wild teaches us otherwise, again and again, if we are willing to pay attention. The greatest treasure in the wild is not the strongest body or the sharpest teeth. It is not the biggest territory or the most abundant hunting grounds. The greatest treasure is something that cannot be taken by force. It is the wisdom to know when to fight and when to show mercy, when to compete and when to cooperate. Zara and Sahara discovered this treasure not through planning or calculation, but through instinct, through the deep knowledge that mothers carry about what truly matters. As I finish this story, I want you to think about something. In our own lives, we face moments where we must choose between competing with others or finding ways to coexist. We encounter situations where we could harm those who might be our rivals, or we could choose to recognize our shared struggles and challenges. What would you do in Zara's position? Would you have the courage to protect the children of your greatest competitor? Would you have the wisdom to recognize when mercy is more powerful than violence? This story happened in the grasslands of Texas, but its message resonates everywhere. It speaks to something universal about the nature of motherhood, about the bonds that can form when creatures choose connection over conflict. It reminds us that even in the harsh and unforgiving wild, there is room for compassion, for understanding, for the recognition that we are all fighting the same battle to protect what we love. Did this story touch something deep inside you? Did it make you think about the choices you face in your own life? I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling me what you felt when you heard about Zara's decision to protect those lion cubs. Tell me if you have ever had to choose between your instinct for self-protection and your compassion for others. Your thoughts and experiences matter, and they add depth to the conversation we are having here. If this video moved you, if it made you see the animal kingdom in a new light, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We share stories like this because we believe the wild has lessons to teach us, wisdom to offer us about how to live with courage and compassion in a challenging world. Thank you for staying with us until the end. If this story touched your heart, please consider supporting us by looking for the thanks button with the heart icon below the video, so we can continue sharing more moving stories. See you in the next story.